Hi everyone, Ray here, and it's time for this week's project management tip. Now, at the time that I'm recording this, we just finished Women in History Month, and I thought it would be a good idea to talk about women in project management. I noticed one of my most recent project management classes had an unexpected number of women. In fact, one class was 2/3 women, 1/3 men, which is exactly the opposite of what recent surveys have shown exists in a lot of workplaces. So it may be good to see that some of this diversity gap is closing. Now, again, it seemed fitting to take a few minutes to recognize 6 women who in particular have influenced me personally in my practice of project management. And I also need to credit a recent guest poster, Gloria Martinez of womenled.org, for inspiring this idea. The first is Naomi Caietti. Now, I've known Naomi for about 15 years from my volunteer work with PMI, and in particular, in PMI Region 7, where we both reside. Now, unbeknownst until more recent times, we had actually both quit our full-time corporate work around the same time, around 2013, to start our own companies. Around 2017 or 18, we collaborated on a book. I contributed a chapter on conflict resolution, and Naomi was the executive editor, and it was called Transform Your Project Leadership. Now, this experience inspired me to write more, and in 2018, I published my first major book, Accidental Project Manager. Next is Grace Murray Hopper. Now, I first became acquainted with then Captain Hopper while a student at Clarkson. We had a very small number of students in the math department interested in pursuing a computer science curriculum, and Captain Hopper came to campus a couple of times, almost yearly, to present. She always brought along her now famous nanosecond length of wire. Since these were small meetings, we had a chance for a more personal interaction, and she always invited us to keep in contact with her. Now, another famous story of how her team invented virtual memory when they were unable to get a computer they needed. Her get it done attitude was something that I adopted. Right out of college, I worked on a team that had a difficult problem to solve using COBOL and CODASYL databases. Captain Hopper returned my call and referred us to someone who could help. As my career evolved, I was branded as the one to go to when you had an impossible or difficult problem to solve. Now, sadly, Rear Admiral Grace Murray Hopper passed away in 1992. Laverne Johnson is the founder, president, and CEO of International Institute for Learning, Inc., a company that specializes in training for project management and related areas of business. She's been named one of PM Network's top 50 global leaders as a member of the PMI Executive Council. IILs, many methods of learning really resonates with me. While the idea that we have preferred learning styles has been disproven, it is still necessary to include many learning methods in training programs for engagement and improved retention of learning. It's important to note that Laverne, along with her team at IIL, created International Project Management Day. Now, while she is only one on this list I haven't worked with personally, her impact has really made a difference in my project management. Rita Mulcahy. Now, it's hard for me to forget Rita Mulcahy. When I became a PMP in 2000, my sole source of study was one of her PMP exam prep books. While I had practiced project management for almost 20 years at that point, material helped fill in gaps, give me some good exam practice advice, and I passed on my first attempt. Later, during my time as a PMI volunteer, I had an opportunity to hear a number of her presentations at PMI Global Congresses. She literally made me a millionaire in play money with a prize for correctly answering a question about the WBS during one of her many entertaining and educational presentations. Rita was always fun to talk with and accessible to project managers. Sadly, Rita passed away in 2010. Sandra Rowe. I had the good fortune to have Dr. Sandra Rowe as a classmate when I went through PMI's Leadership Institute master's class. Sandra had a passion for both lessons learned and help for small projects and accidental project managers. I considered myself fortunate enough to get information from her PhD studies on lessons learned and use it in my classes. Hundreds of students over the past 5 to 6 years have benefited from this information. We also had some brief collaboration on our books in 2020 when I provided feedback and was a reviewer for her book, Project Management for Small Projects. Jean Tabaka. For about 2 to 3 years, from 2020 to 2022, 2020 to 2002, I worked at COBOL Systems in their global services organization, where Jean was a close colleague. Jean was instrumental in shaping the COBOL e-roadmap project methodology, and I learned a lot about creating good methodologies from her. It was also during that time that I had to seriously study the inner workings of Microsoft Project to better manage the template e-roadmap provided for schedules. Jean was wonderful to work with, and we were both saddened when we had to leave COBOL. Shortly after, Jean became an evangelist for agile methods, and I went on to eventually work with schools and school districts for 10 years. We occasionally kept in touch, but not nearly as often as I would have liked. Sadly, Jean passed away in 2016. Now, while these aren't the only women that have inspired my practice of project management, they certainly are the top half dozen from the perspective of time I've known them and the impact that they've had. My apologies if anyone feels left out. Have any women influenced your practice of project management? If so, please leave a comment below. And thanks again, as always, for listening to the Project Management Tip. Hope to see you next week. Take care, everyone.